The rain fell in thin, persistent sheets, turning the cemetery grass into a sodden carpet beneath my feet. Portland in March, predictably dismal, perfectly matching my shattered world. I stood motionless as they lowered Evelyn's casket into the ground, the polished mahogany gleaming even under the gunmetal sky. 12 years of marriage, ended by a sudden aneurysm that took her in her sleep. No warning. No goodbye. Mr. Carver? Pastor Reynolds touched my elbow gently. Would you like to say a few words? I nodded mechanically, stepping forward to face the small gathering of mourners, colleagues from her marketing firm, neighbors, a few college friends. The words I'd rehearsed all morning felt hollow now, sticking in my throat like dry paper. Evelyn was. I began, then paused as raindrops splattered against my black suit. Evelyn was sunshine. Even on days like this. Someone in the back row, a woman I didn't recognize, dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Next to her stood a tall man with steel-gray hair, watching me with an intensity that felt invasive. I looked away, forcing myself to continue. She brought light into every room. Made everyone feel like they mattered. The rain intensified as if nature itself was weeping. I thought we had decades ahead of us. More time. More. My voice cracked. I couldn't finish. Reynolds stepped in, mercifully continuing the service while I retreated into the fog of my grief. The mourners filed past, murmuring condolences that washed over me without landing. I focused on the casket, on the spray of white lilies, her favorite, now speckled with raindrops. As the crowd dispersed, I remained rooted, unable to take the final step away from her. The cemetery workers waited patiently at a distance, ready to complete their grim task once I left. Mr. Carver? A voice behind me. Deep, measured. Lucas Carver? I turned to face the gray-haired man I'd noticed earlier. Mid-40s, expensive coat, umbrella held at a precise angle. His eyes, pale blue, calculating, assessed me with a strange familiarity. Do I know you? I asked. No. He extended his hand. But I knew Evelyn. I shook it automatically. His grip was firm, confident. I don't recall seeing you at the service before today, I said. I kept my distance. Out of respect. He shifted, withdrawing something from his coat pocket. I'm sorry for your loss. The phrase everyone used. Empty words for an emptiness nothing could fill. Thank you for coming, I replied, the standard response. I turned to leave, but he stepped closer. I thought you should have this. He held out a photograph, protected from the rain by a clear plastic sleeve. I took it reflexively. Through the rain-speckled covering, I saw a wedding photo. Evelyn in white, radiant, laughing. Her dark hair swept up elegantly, pearls at her throat. A familiar image, except it wasn't. The man beside her wasn't me. My brain stuttered, trying to process the impossibility before me. The dress was different from the one in our wedding photos. The setting unfamiliar, a garden somewhere, roses climbing a trellis behind them. What is this? My voice sounded distant, detached. My wedding day. He watched my face carefully. Our wedding day. The rain seemed to grow louder, drumming against my skull. I don't understand. Her name was Evelyn Hart. He spoke each word deliberately. My wife. 8 years married. 3 children. I stared at him, then back at the photo. The date stamp in the corner, May 18, 2017. 5 years after Evelyn and I had married. This is some kind of sick joke, I said, my voice hardening. He sighed, reaching into his pocket again. Produced a driver's license, held it toward me. I read the name through the blur of rain, Nathan Hart. Address in Lake Oswego, an affluent Portland suburb. I only learned about you last week, he continued, when the hospital called. They found my number in her phone. The ground seemed to tilt beneath me. My fingers tightened around the photo, crumpling its edge. That's impossible. Evelyn was with me. We lived together for 12 years. Except when she wasn't. His expression held no malice, only a familiar pain. Business trips. Family emergencies. Girls' weekends. My mind raced through a catalog of Evelyn's absences. The marketing conferences. The client meetings in Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles. Always returning with stories, photos, small gifts. She was meticulous, Nathan continued. Kept calendars for both lives. Separate phones. Different email accounts. Why are you telling me this? My voice was barely audible above the rain. Because you deserve to know. Just like I did. He took back the photo, tucking it away. There's more if you want it. When you're ready. I stood paralyzed, rain streaming down my face, mingling with tears I didn't realize I was shedding. The kids? I managed to ask. How old? Something shifted in his eyes, pity perhaps. 16, 14, and 11. 3 children I never knew about. A family hidden away in Lake Oswego, just 20 minutes from our Pearl District apartment. I need to go, I said, fighting a wave of nausea. He nodded, handing me a business card that quickly grew damp between my fingers. When you're ready, he repeated. I watched him walk away, a stranger carrying pieces of my wife I never knew existed. Behind me, the cemetery workers approached the grave, ready to lower Evelyn, or whoever she truly was, into the earth. The rain continued to fall, washing away everything I thought I knew. Everything except one unbearable question. Who had I really been married to for the past 12 years? I didn't remember driving home. The windshield wiper's rhythmic scraping somehow guided me back to my apartment in the Pearl District. Our corner unit on the 8th floor had always been Evelyn's pride. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing Portland's skyline, the Willamette River a silver ribbon in the distance. I stood dripping in the entryway, Nathan Hart's business card soggy between my fingers. Real estate developer. Lake Oswego address. Cell number. My thumb traced the embossed lettering as if searching for some hidden mark that would expose it as counterfeit. This isn't happening, I whispered to the empty space. Evelyn's presence lingered everywhere. Her cashmere throw draped over the sofa arm. Her half-empty tea mug from 5 days ago still on the side table. I couldn't bring myself to wash it. Her scent, jasmine and something uniquely her, clung to the air. I shed my wet clothes, leaving them in a heap by the door. The silence pressed against my ears as I moved to our bedroom, a space suddenly foreign, tainted. How many nights had she lain beside me after returning from him? How many mornings had she kissed me goodbye before going home to her children? 3 children. 16, 14, 11. My hands trembled as I opened her closet. Designer suits for work. Casual clothes for weekends. Everything neatly organized, color-coded. Evelyn's system for everything. I ran my fingers along the fabrics, searching for, what? Evidence? Some tangible proof that would either confirm or disprove Hart's impossible claim. Behind her winter coats, I found the locked suitcase she always used for business trips. I'd never questioned why she kept it locked. Privacy was something we both respected, or so I'd thought. The small key she kept in her jewelry box opened it easily. Inside nothing unusual. Travel-sized toiletries. A spare phone charger. Folded scarves. I lifted each item, inspecting, uncertain what I was looking for. Beneath a silk scarf, my fingers found something hard and cold. A small silver locket on a delicate chain. I'd never seen it before. Heart pounding, I pried it open. Inside, a tiny photograph, a young girl with Evelyn's eyes and smile. On the opposite side, engraved initials, H. Evelyn Hart. My legs gave way. I sank to the floor, clutching the locket. Physical proof in my palm. Not some elaborate hoax or cruel joke played by a stranger. Who were you? I asked the empty room. I returned to the suitcase, dumping its contents onto the carpet. Burrowing through the items with increasing desperation, I found nothing else unusual until I reached the lining. A slight bulge in the corner. I tore at the fabric, fingers searching until they closed around something flat and rigid. Pulled it free. A plastic hotel key card. The Heathman Hotel, downtown Portland. Tucked with it, a receipt dated 3 weeks ago. A 2-night stay. 3 weeks ago, Evelyn had been in Seattle for a marketing presentation. Memories rushed back, colliding with this new reality. 6 years into our marriage, when Evelyn started taking more business trips. Her explanation: a promotion, more client meetings, expanded territories. I'd been proud of her success, never questioning the increasing absences. 2, sometimes 3 nights a week, away. I thought of the separate phone she kept for work. How she'd step onto the balcony for certain calls. The way she guarded her laptop, always logging out when she stepped away. All hiding a second husband. Children. I stumbled to the kitchen and fumbled in the cabinet for the scotch I rarely touched. Poured 3 fingers. Drank it straight, welcoming the burning path it carved down my throat. Poured another. The locket dangled from my fingers, gleaming in the fading afternoon light. The girl in the photo, Evelyn's daughter, looked about 14. Which one? The 16-year-old or the 14-year-old Hart had mentioned? I opened my laptop and typed, Nathan Hart Portland Real Estate into the search bar. His company website appeared immediately. Hart Development Group. His photo, the same man from the cemetery, smiled confidently beside a corporate biography touting his 20 years in luxury development. Awards. charitable boards, community recognition. Another search, Nathan Hart Family Portland. A newspaper article from 2 years ago, local developer funds new library wing. The photograph showed Hart cutting a ribbon, flanked by a smiling woman and 3 children. The woman was Evelyn. My Evelyn, looking exactly as she did when she left our apartment that same week for what she'd called a client appreciation event in Bend. I zoomed in on the children. 2 girls, 1 boy. The older girl, unmistakably Evelyn's daughter, had the same heart-shaped face, the same slight dimple when she smiled. I closed the laptop and clutched the locket tighter, its edges biting into my palm. A lifetime of shared confidences, hopes, disappointments, all manufactured. The woman I'd devoted 12 years to, whose body I'd just buried, was a carefully constructed fiction. I poured a third scotch, staring at Hart's business card on the counter. "When you're ready," he'd said. As if I'd ever be ready to face the scope of this deception. But I needed answers. The rain continued its relentless rhythm against the windows as night fell over Portland, matching the darkness that had descended on everything I thought I knew. Morning arrived with a dull, throbbing headache and the taste of stale scotch on my tongue. For one merciful moment between sleep and consciousness, I forgot. Then reality crashed back. Evelyn's funeral, Nathan Hart, the silver locket still clutched in my hand. I forced myself into the shower, letting scalding water pound my skin. The bathroom mirror reflected a stranger, hollow eyes, stubbled jaw, the slump of a man whose foundation had crumbled beneath him. Evelyn's toiletries lined the counter. Expensive creams, makeup, her favorite perfume. I picked up the jasmine scent, remembering how she'd dab it on her wrists, behind her ears. Had she worn the same perfume in her other home? With her other husband? My phone buzzed. A text from my accounting firm. "Take all the time you need, Luke. Clients covered." The ordinary world continuing while mine had imploded. I dressed mechanically and returned to Evelyn's closet. This time I pulled everything out, searching each pocket, bag and shoebox. In a hatbox on the top shelf, beneath tissue paper, I found a manila envelope. Inside, a birth certificate for Evelyn Marie Hart, born 36 years ago in Tucson, Arizona. Not Evelyn Shaw. Not the Chicago native whose parents I'd met 3 times in 12 years. Whose childhood stories featured Lake Michigan winters and Cubs games with her father. Also in the envelope, a passport in the name Evelyn Hart. 2 credit cards. A driver's license with her photo but a Lake Oswego address. The address on Nathan Hart's business card. I sank onto the bed, staring at these artifacts of her other existence. The woman who'd shared my bed had built an entirely separate identity, seamlessly shifting between them. My phone rang. Evelyn's mother, Margaret. "Lucas." Her voice was carefully modulated grief. "Just checking on you, dear. How are you holding up?" I stared at the birth certificate in my hand. "Actually, Margaret, I have some questions." Pause. "Of course, dear. What about? Did Evelyn ever mention someone named Nathan Hart to you?" The silence stretched. 1 second. 2. 3. "I don't believe so," she finally replied too casually. "Why do you ask?" "He came to the funeral yesterday. Claimed to be her husband." Another silence. Then, "Oh, Lucas. Grief makes people do strange things. Some mentally ill person showing up." "He had photographs, Margaret. Wedding photos. And I found documents." My voice hardened. A birth certificate for an Evelyn Hart from Tucson. The sharp intake of breath was audible. "Lucas. Was her maiden name Hart, Margaret? Not Shaw? Did she grow up in Arizona, not Chicago? Do you and Henry even live in Chicago? Now listen." "No, you listen," I cut in, surprising myself with my vehemence. "I buried my wife yesterday and learned my entire marriage was a lie. I deserve the truth." A muffled sound as if she'd covered the receiver. Distant voices. Then Henry, her husband, came on the line. "Luke." His gruff voice held none of its usual warmth. "This is not a conversation for the telephone. Then come to Portland. Today. I want answers." "That's not possible. Margaret isn't well." "Margaret seems perfectly fine. And I found Evelyn's, or whatever her name really was, birth certificate. Tucson, Arizona. So either start explaining or I start making calls to find out exactly who you people are." More muffled conversation. Henry returned, "We'll call you back." The line went dead. I hurled the phone across the room. It bounced off the wall, landing on the carpet with a soft thud. I gathered the documents, tucking them into my laptop bag along with the locket. Heart pounding, I grabbed my keys. I needed air. Space to think. Rain had given way to Portland's signature gray mist as I walked along the waterfront. The Willamette River flowed sluggishly, carrying debris from recent storms. Like me being swept along by currents I couldn't control. My phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. "This is Nathan Hart. Ready to talk?" I stared at it, then typed back, "Where?" The response came immediately, "Tanner Springs Park. 30 minutes. The small park was just blocks from my apartment. I arrived early, settling on a bench overlooking the artificial wetland. The urban oasis was empty in the late morning chill, water drops clinging to reeds and grasses. Nathan Hart arrived precisely on time, dressed in a charcoal suit beneath a black overcoat. He carried 2 paper cups. "Coffee," he said, offering one. "Black." I wasn't sure how you'd take it. I accepted it wordlessly, the warmth seeping into my cold fingers. He sat beside me, maintaining a respectful distance. "You've been looking," he stated, not a question. "Found a birth certificate. Evelyn Hart from Tucson." He nodded. Her real name. Her real hometown. Anne Margaret and Henry Shaw? Her uncle and his wife. Not her parents. I took a scalding sip of coffee, welcoming the burn. She told me they were her parents. She told me they were dead. A flicker of something, anger? Pain? Crossed his face. Turns out we both got her origin story in pieces. Scattered fragments she rearranged to suit each narrative. Wind rustled through the reeds, carrying a damp chill. I pulled Evelyn's locket from my pocket. "I found this." He glanced at it, nodded. "Sophie's picture inside. Our eldest." "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "Coming to the funeral. Contacting me now. Why not just let me live in ignorance?" His pale eyes held mine. "Because I've been where you are. Discovering your life is built on lies. And because..." He hesitated. "There's more you need to know. About the woman we both thought we knew." "More I need to know?" I echoed, staring at the ripples forming in my coffee. "Like what?" Nathan Hart checked his watch. A sleek, expensive timepiece that probably cost more than my monthly salary. "I have a meeting in 30 minutes. Downtown." He stood, adjusting his coat. "My office. Tomorrow. 10 a.m. He handed me a business card, crisp and dry this time, with an address in Portland's financial district. "That's it," I said, anger flaring. "You drop a bomb on my life and just walk away?" He paused, something like sympathy crossing his features. "Trust me, Carver. You need time to process what you already know before taking on more." He gestured to the locket in my hand. "Bring that tomorrow. And anything else you've found." I watched him walk away, his tall figure disappearing around the curve of the path. Part of me wanted to pursue him, demand answers now. Another part was grateful for the reprieve. I spent the afternoon in a haze, alternating between numb disbelief and searing rage. Emails accumulated unanswered. Condolence messages blinked on my phone. I ignored them all, staring instead at the silver locket and the documents spread across our dining table. No, my dining table. Nothing in this apartment had ever truly been ours. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake, remembering 1,000 moments with Evelyn. Our first date at a dive bar in the industrial district, where she'd impressed me by ordering scotch, neat. The weekend trip to Seattle where she'd proposed to me, not waiting for tradition. The quiet Sunday mornings reading together, her feet in my lap. Had any of it been real? Morning arrived with no answers, only the weight of what I'd lost. Not just Evelyn, but the certainty of who we'd been together. Hart Development Group occupied the top floor of a glass tower with views spanning the city. The receptionist, young, polished, professionally sympathetic, escorted me to a conference room where Nathan Hart stood studying a large architectural model. "Carver." He nodded in greeting. "Coffee?" "I've had enough," I replied, taking in the space, all steel, glass, and power. Framed magazine covers featuring Hart adorned one wall. Awards filled a shelf. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased Portland's skyline, the mist finally lifting to reveal rare blue sky. "Nice place," I said flatly. "Real estate must be lucrative." A ghost of a smile. "It has its moments." He gestured to a chair. "Shall we?" I remained standing. "You said there was more I needed to know." He studied me for a moment, then walked to a credenza and removed a thick manila folder. "I've had a week longer than you to start piecing things together," he said, placing it on the conference table. "It's not a complete picture, but..." I opened the folder. On top lay printouts of bank statements, accounts I'd never seen in Evelyn's name. Large transfers. Significant amounts. She was diverting money, Nathan explained, sitting across from me. From both of us, apparently. I flipped through the statements. To where? Offshore accounts. The Caymans. Singapore. He slid another document toward me. This one's in her uncle's name, Henry Shaw. I remembered my call with Margaret and Henry yesterday. Their evasiveness. Their lies. They were in on it? Nathan nodded. Appears so. From what I've gathered, they helped her establish dual identities years ago. Before either of us met her. My mind reeled. What? What possible reason? Money. His voice was matter-of-fact. Your accounting background might be useful here. These statements show regular transfers to accounts linked to her uncle. Small enough to avoid flags, large enough to add up significantly over time. I sank into the chair, suddenly exhausted. So we were, what? Marks? Piggy banks? Nathan's expression hardened. Among other things. He pulled out another document, a life insurance policy. My name listed as her spouse and beneficiary. Coverage, $1 million. I found 3 more of these, he continued. All with different companies. All listing you as beneficiary. I stared at him, uncomprehending. She had identical policies naming me, he added. $7 million total. All purchased within the last 3 years. The implication hit me like a physical blow. You think she was planning to die? No. His eyes met mine, cold and certain. But someone who maintains dual identities, diverts funds offshore, and maxes out life insurance policies is planning something. What stopped her? The question came out barely audible. Nature, he said simply. The aneurysm. Unpredictable. Unpreventable. I thought of her final morning. Ordinary. Mundane. She kissed me goodbye before heading to a client meeting. Found dead in her car hours later in a parking garage downtown. There's more, Nathan continued. Passport applications under a third name. Property purchases in Arizona through shell corporations. And this. He slid over a photograph. Evelyn with a man I didn't recognize. Middle-aged, distinguished, arm around her waist. Too intimate for a business relationship. Who is he? Robert Keller. Financial advisor. Deceased 3 years ago. Nathan's voice chilled. Car accident. Very convenient timing, just after several large transfers from accounts linked to Evelyn. The conference room seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of the table. Are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything, Nathan cut in. I'm showing you evidence. Drawing conclusions is your choice. I studied his face, searching for deception. Found only the mirror of my own bewilderment and betrayal. Why show me all this? Why not go to the police? His laugh was brittle. And tell them what? That my dead wife, who was also your dead wife, might have been planning something criminal? That we were both duped for years. He shook his head. Besides, I have the children to consider. The children. Her children. 3 innocent lives caught in whatever web Evelyn had been spinning. What do you want from me? I asked finally. His gaze was steady. Help figuring out what she was really doing. Before someone else comes looking. Someone else. I echoed, stomach nodding. Like who? Nathan slid another photograph across the table. Evelyn with an older man at what appeared to be a charity gala. Lawrence Danner. Investment banker. Associated with several accounts that received transfers from Evelyn. You think he was involved in whatever she was doing? Or another Mark? Nathan's expression remained unreadable. Either way, he's been calling her cell phone. Multiple times since the obituary ran. A wave of exhaustion crashed over me. Every revelation seemed to spawn new questions, expanding the web of Evelyn's deceptions exponentially. I need time to process this, I said, gathering the documents. Nathan nodded. Take my card. Private number on the back. Call when you're ready for more. More. As if I hadn't already drowned in revelations. I left the gleaming office tower in a daze, clutching the folder of evidence against my chest like a shield. The spring sunshine felt obscenely bright against the darkness of my thoughts. Evelyn hadn't just betrayed our marriage, she'd constructed an elaborate criminal enterprise with me as an unwitting participant. I wandered downtown without direction, eventually finding myself at Director Park. I sat near the fountain watching children play while their parents chatted nearby. Normal lives. Ordinary relationships built on truth, or at least the comfortable omissions that characterize most marriages. Evelyn's children. 3 of them. Living just miles away. Before I fully registered my decision, I was driving toward Lake Oswego, Nathan Hart's address entered into my phone's GPS. The rational part of my brain screamed warnings. What exactly did I plan to accomplish? What would I say if I encountered these children who shouldn't exist? Hart's neighborhood was exactly what I'd expect from a successful developer. Expansive homes set back from tree-lined streets, manicured lawns still glistening from morning sprinklers. His house, their house, was a modern masterpiece of wood and glass, 3 stories of architectural perfection overlooking the lake. I parked a block away feeling like an intruder, a stalker. I was about to leave when the front door opened. A teenage girl emerged, backpack slung over one shoulder. Behind her, a younger girl and boy followed, all 3 converging at the end of the driveway where a blue SUV waited. The driver, an older woman, perhaps a nanny, gestured impatiently. The oldest girl turned back toward the house, calling something. Even from this distance, I could see Evelyn in her, the graceful way she moved, the tilt of her head as she spoke. The locket in my pocket seemed to burn against my thigh. Sophia. The oldest. 16. An unfamiliar ache bloomed in my chest. These were Evelyn's children. Half-siblings I would have had with her, in another reality where she'd been honest. Where we'd built a life without secrets. The girl climbed into the SUV, which pulled away moments later. I sat frozen, watching until it disappeared around a corner. My phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. Where are you? I didn't respond. Instead, I started my car and followed the blue SUV. It wound through Lake Oswego, eventually stopping at a private school where the 3 children disembarked. The youngest 2 entered the main building, but Sophia remained outside, joining a group of friends on a bench. I parked across the street, watching her through my windshield. Was she complicit in her mother's deceptions? Did she know about me, about the apartment in the Pearl District where her mother spent half her life? My phone rang. Nathan again. This time I answered. You're at Westlake Academy, he said without preamble. I can see your car on the security app. Of course he could. A man like Nathan Hart would have surveillance on his family, especially now. I just wanted to see them, I said, my voice hollow even to my own ears. They don't know about you, Carver? About any of this. His tone was clipped, controlled. I've shielded them since finding out. They believe their mother died while traveling for work. The cruelty of it struck me anew. Even in death, Evelyn's lies continued, rippling outward to damage everyone she'd touched. Meet me at Sterling Coffee on 21st, Nathan continued. 20 minutes. We need to discuss your approach to this situation. He hung up before I could respond. I took one last look at Sophia, this girl who shared Evelyn's DNA but not her calculated nature, I hoped, before driving away. My mind replayed countless moments when Evelyn had been away on business, or visiting a college friend. All those nights I'd fallen asleep alone, believing she was in Seattle or San Francisco. She'd been less than half an hour away, tucking these children into bed. At Sterling Coffee, Nathan already occupied a corner table, 2 cups waiting. He looked tired, the controlled facade from his office beginning to crack. They're good kids, he said as I sat down. They don't deserve to have their memories of their mother destroyed. For the first time, I felt something approaching sympathy for him. Another victim, but with far more collateral damage to manage. What do you suggest? I asked. Discretion. For now. He pushed a cup toward me. We investigate privately. Figure out what she was planning, who else was involved, and whether there's any threat to the children. And if there is? His eyes hardened. Then we deal with it. Together. An unlikely alliance, forged in shared betrayal. I thought of Sophia's face, so like her mother's, and nodded. Together. The next morning, I woke to a text from Henry Shaw. We're in Portland. Nines Hotel. Room 712. 2 p.m. So they'd come after all. The supposed parents, actually uncle and aunt, had decided to face me rather than continue their evasion. I forwarded the message to Nathan, who responded immediately. I'll pick you up at 1:30. I spent the morning combing through the financial documents Nathan had provided, my accounting background finally proving useful in this nightmare. The pattern was clear but puzzling. Evelyn had been methodically siphoning funds, not large sums that would trigger alerts, but consistent amounts that accumulated significantly over time. My preliminary calculations suggested she'd diverted nearly $2 million over the past 6 years. But why maintain 2 husbands? 2 households? The effort, stress, and risk seemed disproportionate to the financial gain, especially for someone with her intelligence and marketing skills. She could have earned more legitimately with far less complexity. Nathan arrived precisely at 1:30, driving a sleek black Range Rover. He wore casual clothes today, Dark jeans, a gray cashmere sweater, looking less like the power broker from his office and more like the grieving husband he presumably was. "Ready for this?" he asked as I slid into the passenger seat. "Not remotely," I admitted. "But necessary." The Nines occupied the upper floors of the historic Meyer and Frank building downtown. We rode the elevator in silence, each lost in our own thoughts about the confrontation ahead. Henry opened the door before we knocked, his normally robust frame somehow diminished. Margaret sat perched on a sofa by the window, hands clutched around a teacup, her carefully styled gray hair and pearl necklace at odds with her drawn face. "Lucas," she began, then stopped at the sight of Nathan. "What is he doing here?" "Supporting his fellow victim," I replied coldly. "You know exactly who he is." Henry gestured to the sitting area. "Please. Both of you." We sat across from them, these strangers who'd pretended to be family for over a decade. Henry poured himself a generous scotch from the minibar despite the early hour. "We never meant for anyone to get hurt," Margaret said, her voice barely audible. Nathan's laugh was sharp, humorless. "Tell that to our children. To our bank accounts." Henry raised a hand. "You deserve explanations. But first, understand this was Evelyn's design from the beginning. Not ours." "You facilitated it," I countered. "You posed as her parents. You lied to my face at our wedding." "She was our niece," Margaret said. "Our only family after her parents. My brother and his wife died in a car accident when she was 19. We raised her through college." "Then what?" Nathan pressed. "Helped her create dual identities? For what purpose?" Henry took a long swallow of scotch. "It began as a tax strategy. Property investments under different names. Nothing criminal, just creative accounting." My professional indignation flared. "That's fraud." "Gray areas," Henry corrected. "But then Evelyn met you, Lucas. And it became complicated." "She genuinely cared for you," Margaret interjected, looking at me. "She hadn't planned on marriage. When it happened, she compartmentalized rather than end things. Then she met me," Nathan added. "And what? Decided two husbands were better than one?" Henry's expression hardened. "Evelyn saw opportunities. Always did since childhood. Your financial stability." He nodded to me, "And your business connections." A nod to Nathan. "She leveraged both." "For what?" I demanded. "We found the offshore accounts. The insurance policies. What was the endgame?" Margaret and Henry exchanged glances. "Costa Rica," Margaret finally said. "She was building a resort development there. Through shell companies. Using both your connections, Nathan, and your accounting expertise, Lucas, without either of you knowing. A $40 million project," Henry added. "Nearly complete. Ready to sell for at least $60 million, according to her projections." Nathan leaned forward. "And then what?" "Disappear with the profits." Henry nodded slowly. "New identity already established. Natalie Reeves. Canadian passport. Accounts in Zurich." My mind reeled. She was planning to fake her death? Leave us both? Leave her children? "Not immediately," Margaret said. "The plan was for us to die first, on paper. Car accident abroad. She would inherit, consolidate certain assets, then stage her own disappearance 6 months later." The calculated coldness of it chilled me. "And you agreed to this? To abandon your lives?" Henry reached into his jacket pocket, withdrawing a folded document. Pushed it across the coffee table toward us. "A bank statement. Cayman Islands. $10 million. Our retirement fund," he said flatly. "For playing our parts." Nathan's face flushed with anger. "While her children grew up believing their mother was dead? She planned to send for them. Eventually," Margaret whispered. "Once established." "And me?" I asked. "Was I just a convenient source of funds? A useful tax professional?" Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "She did love you, Lucas. In her way. But Evelyn always prioritized herself," Henry finished. "Since childhood. Brilliant but lacking certain moral constraints." I noticed a telltale bulge under Henry's jacket. "Are you carrying a gun?" His hand moved instinctively toward it. "We've had threats. Since Evelyn's death." "From whom?" Nathan demanded. "Lawrence Danner," Henry said. "Her partner in the Costa Rica development. He suspects we know where the project documentation is. The ownership papers." "And do you?" I asked. Henry's expression closed. "We've said enough." Nathan stood abruptly. "Not nearly enough. Your niece robbed us of years of our lives. built a house of lies. And now you're still protecting her schemes? We're protecting ourselves, Henry replied. Danner is dangerous. Evelyn's death was convenient for some people. Maybe not as natural as it seemed. His implication hung in the air between us. Had Evelyn been murdered? Had her intricate plans unraveled not through natural causes but deliberate action? As if reading my thoughts, Margaret whispered, "Be careful who you trust. Even each other." We left the Nines Hotel in stunned silence, Margaret's warning echoing between us. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across downtown Portland as we walked to Nathan's Range Rover. "Do you believe them?" I finally asked. "About her death not being natural?" Nathan unlocked the car but didn't immediately get in. An aneurysm is convenient, unpredictable, undetectable beforehand in most cases, and virtually impossible to prove otherwise afterward, I added, thinking of the cremation Evelyn had specified in her will. No body meant no possibility of a second autopsy. "I need a drink," Nathan said. "Join me?" We found ourselves at Clyde Common, sitting at a corner table away from the early happy hour crowd. 2 neat whiskeys between us, a temporary truce forged in shared betrayal. $40 million, I said, still processing the scale of Evelyn's scheme. How did we miss it? Because we saw what we wanted to see, Nathan replied, swirling his drink. A beautiful, intelligent woman who seemed to adore us. You more than me, apparently, I said bitterly. She was planning to take your children. He flinched, an almost imperceptible tightening around his eyes. Not a comfort, Carver. I pulled out my phone, searching for Lawrence Danner Portland. Pages of results. Philanthropist, investment banker, board member for multiple civic organizations. Photos showed a distinguished man in his 60s, silver-haired, patrician features, the practiced smile of wealth and influence. We need professional help, I said, showing Nathan the screen. Like who? The police. He scoffed. With what evidence? That our dead wife conned us both? They'll laugh us out of the station. Not the police. A private investigator. Nathan considered this, then nodded slowly. I might know someone. Former Portland PD, discreet. 2 hours and another whiskey later, we sat in a cramped office above a convenience store in northeast Portland. Detective Clara Vance was not what I'd expected, 40-ish, with sharp brown eyes and a no-nonsense bob of silver-streaked dark hair. Her office was meticulously organized, at odds with the building's shabby exterior. Let me get this straight, she said after we'd explained our situation. Your wife was married to both of you simultaneously, running elaborate financial schemes. And you think her death might not have been natural. That's the condensed version, Nathan confirmed. Detective Vance leaned back in her chair, assessing us. Usually when 2 men discover they've been sharing a wife, they're not sitting together calmly in my office. Nothing about this situation is usual, I replied. And why come to me instead of my former colleagues at Portland PD? Nathan placed a thick envelope on her desk. Because we need someone who can operate flexibly. We have suspicions, not evidence. Names, not proof. She left the envelope untouched. I don't bend laws, Mr. Hart. We're not asking you to, I interjected. Just to look where official channels might not bother to. A woman with multiple identities dies suddenly at the moment she's orchestrating a multimillion-dollar fraud. Coincidence feels unlikely. Vance studied me, then Nathan. 48 hours, she finally said. I'll do preliminary digging. No promises beyond that. She took our statements separately, recording each detail of our marriages to Evelyn, the financial discoveries, and our meeting with Henry and Margaret Shaw. When she finished, night had fallen over Portland, the streetlights outside casting shadows across her office walls. Where are the Shaws staying? She asked as we prepared to leave. The Nines, Nathan replied. Room 712. Vance made a note. Don't contact them again without telling me first. And watch your backs. If Danner is as connected as you say, he has resources at his disposal. The warning followed me home, a shadow at my heels. My apartment felt different now, less a sanctuary and more a stage set where Evelyn had performed her role as my loving wife. I wandered from room to room, seeing evidence of her calculated deception everywhere. The carefully curated bookshelf containing novels she'd specifically mentioned enjoying with me, the framed photographs from trips we'd taken, her smile revealing nothing of her divided life. As I passed the kitchen counter, I noticed the blinking light on our landline answering machine. We rarely used it, a relic kept mainly for emergencies and takeout orders. The message timestamp showed 4:37 p.m. I pressed play. Lucas Carver. A male voice, unfamiliar. You've been asking questions about Evelyn. About Lawrence Danner. Some questions are better left unasked. A chill ran through me. The message had been left while Nathan and I were meeting with the Shaws. My cell phone rang, startling me. Nathan. I just got home, he said without preamble. Someone's been here. What do you mean? Nothing obvious. Nothing taken. But things are slightly moved. And there was a note on my kitchen island. Drop it or lose more than you already have. I told him about my message. They're watching us, he said, voice tight. Both of us. Oh, Danner? Or whoever else was involved in Evelyn's schemes. Pause. I'm moving the kids to my sister's in Seattle tomorrow. Until we figure this out. I glanced around my apartment, suddenly aware of its vulnerability. The decorative locks Evelyn had insisted on for the front door. The large windows showcasing Portland's skyline, and offering clear sight lines into my living space. Vance needs to know about this, I said. Already texted her. She's coming by my place now. Another pause. Carver, be careful. After we hung up, I systematically checked every room, every closet. Nothing seemed disturbed, yet I couldn't shake the sensation of intrusion. Of being watched. On a hunch, I grabbed a chair and climbed up to examine the smoke detector in the hallway, the one Evelyn had insisted needed replacing last year, calling in a specialist, when I'd offered to do it myself. Inside, nestled beside the legitimate components, was a tiny camera. I stared at the tiny camera, rage building like a physical pressure in my chest. Not content with lying to my face for 12 years, Evelyn had actively surveilled me in my own home. Our home. The violation was profound, intimate in its invasion. My fingers trembled as I called Nathan. I found a camera, I said when he answered. Hidden in the smoke detector. She was watching me. A beat of silence. Check everything, Carver. Everywhere. By the time Detective Vance arrived an hour later, I discovered 3 more cameras. One in the bedroom light fixture, another in the living room bookshelf concealed inside a hollowed-out novel, and a third in the bathroom vent. Each perfectly positioned to monitor my daily life. Vance examined each device with latex-gloved hands. High-end. Motion-activated. Wireless transmission to a remote server. She placed the components in evidence bags. I'll have my tech contact check for digital fingerprints. Could these be connected to whoever left those threats? I asked. Possibly, she replied. But given their placement and age, I guess these were Evelyn's. Monitoring you was part of maintaining her dual life. The thought made me physically ill. Every private moment, every vulnerability potentially recorded and reviewed by my wife. A woman who had never truly existed. Nathan found evidence of intrusion but no cameras at his house. Vance continued, making notes. Interesting discrepancy. What does it mean? Could mean she trusted him less. Needed more control over your environment. Vance's expression was carefully neutral. Or could mean whoever's threatening you now already had access to his security system. Morning brought a text from Vance. Meeting at Tributary Coffee. 11 a.m. Bring heart. The cafe was busy enough to provide anonymity but quiet enough for conversation. Vance arrived last, sliding into our booth with a tablet and a thick folder. Preliminary findings, she said without preamble. Lawrence Danner is exactly who you thought. Investment banker, connected to several of Evelyn's shell companies. Currently in Portland, staying at the Heathman. Have you approached him? Nathan asked. Not yet. She sipped her coffee. But I've been watching him. He's meeting regularly with a man named Victor Mercer, former SEC investigator turned private security consultant. You think Danner hired him to find something Evelyn had? I suggested. Most likely the Costa Rica property documents, Vance agreed. Ownership certificates, bank access. According to my financial contact, that development is nearly complete. Ready to sell. Whoever holds the paperwork controls $40 million. Nathan leaned forward. And you think this is what got Evelyn killed? I didn't say that, Vance cautioned. But I've requested her medical examiner's report. There are certain toxins that can trigger symptoms identical to an aneurysm. The implications settled over our table like a physical weight. Murder. Not just betrayal but calculated elimination. What's our next step? I asked. You, Vance said turning to me, need to stay under the radar. Whoever's watching clearly considers you the weak link, the one more likely to expose the operation. And me? Nathan asked. Maintain normalcy. Take the children to Seattle as planned. My contact will meet you there to install additional security. She paused. There's something else. Your daughter Sophia has been searching online for information about Evelyn's death. News reports. Obituaries. Nathan tensed. She's 16. Grieving. She's visited your office building 3 times this week, Vance continued. Accessing your private files according to the security logs you provided. That's impossible, Nathan said. She doesn't have clearance. She used your assistant's credentials. Vance slid over a security image showing Sophia at a computer in what appeared to be Nathan's office. She's looking for something. Or suspects something. I studied the image of the girl I'd glimpsed outside Westlake Academy. In the security photo, her expression was focused, determined. Evelyn's determination. I need to talk to her, Nathan said, already reaching for his phone. Not on the phone, Vance warned. Not when we don't know who's listening. While Nathan stepped outside to arrange to meet his daughter, Vance turned to me. There's something you should know, she said, voice lowered. Those cameras in your apartment, the data wasn't transmitting to Evelyn. At least not directly. What do you mean? The transmission path went through servers registered to shell companies associated with Henry Shaw. Not Evelyn. I processed this new betrayal. Her uncle was spying on me too? Or she was using his infrastructure, Vance suggested. Either way, there are more layers to this than a simple double life. Nathan returned, his face tense. Sophia's meeting me at Powell's Books in an hour. Says she has something important to discuss. I'm coming with you, I said immediately. Nathan hesitated, then nodded. Might as well. If she's piecing things together, she'll find out about you eventually. Vance stood. I'll monitor from a distance. Don't alarm her, but try to determine what she knows or suspects. As we left the cafe, I felt the weight of Evelyn's silver locket in my pocket. The photo of Sophia inside now seemed less a token of maternal affection and more a surveillance tool, another way to keep track of the pieces in Evelyn's elaborate game. What would I say to this girl whose mother had lived a lie? Whose life was now potentially in danger because of secrets she didn't even know existed? Powell's Books loomed ahead, its iconic sign visible through the late morning mist. Inside those walls waited a 16-year-old girl with Evelyn's eyes and, perhaps, answers we desperately needed. Powell's Books sprawled across an entire city block, a labyrinth of literature where one could easily disappear. Nathan led me through the crowded main entrance, past tables of new releases and staff recommendations. She'll be in the rare book room, he said. It's her favorite spot. We climbed to the upper level, footsteps muffled by worn carpet. The rare book room was quieter, separated from the main store by glass doors. Inside, Sophia sat alone at a table near the window, sunlight illuminating her profile, so eerily similar to Evelyn's that my step faltered. She looked up as we approached. Her eyes widened slightly at the sight of me. Dad. Confusion colored her voice. Who's this? Nathan took the seat across from her. Sophia, this is Lucas Carver. He knew your mother. Her gaze assessed me with an intelligence that belied her 16 years. You're not from her marketing firm. I know all her colleagues. No, I agreed, sitting cautiously. I'm not. Sophia looked between us, wariness replacing confusion. What's going on? Why are you meeting with strangers, Dad? Nathan sighed. Soph, I need you to tell me why you've been in my office. Accessing my files. Her cheeks flushed, but her chin lifted defiantly. How did you? Security logs, he replied gently. It's okay. You're not in trouble. But I need to know what you're looking for. She hesitated, then reached into her backpack and pulled out a folded document. Answers. About Mom. She pushed the paper toward Nathan. Like why she had 2 death certificates. I felt the blood drain from my face. Nathan unfolded the paper. A death certificate identical to the one I'd received, except with the name Evelyn Hart instead of Evelyn Carver. Where did you find this? Nathan asked carefully. In Mom's desk. The one in her home office you said was off limits. Her eyes hardened. There's more. Bank statements. Letters. Photos of people I've never met. She turned to me suddenly. Including you. My heart hammered against my ribs. What kind of photos? Wedding photos, she replied, watching my reaction. But that's impossible, right? Because she was married to my dad. The uneasy silence confirmed what she'd already begun to suspect. Oh my God, she whispered. It's true. She was living some kind of double life. Nathan reached for her hand. Sophia. She pulled away. Don't. Just tell me the truth. For once, someone tell me the truth. I met her gaze directly. Your mother was married to both of us. simultaneously. For years. Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back fiercely. That's why she was gone so much. All those business trips. Nathan nodded. Yes. Was anything real? Her voice cracked. Did she even love us? The question hung in the air, impossible to answer with certainty. I think she loved you, I offered finally. The children. That's why she kept the locket. I placed Evelyn's silver locket on the table between us. With your picture inside. Sophia stared at it, recognition flashing across her face. She always wore this. Said it was from her mother. There's more, Nathan said quietly. Financial dealings. Offshore accounts. The Costa Rica project, Sophia supplied, surprising us both. I found documents about that too. Property deeds. Bank transfers. You understand what those mean? I asked. I'm 16, not stupid, she replied with a flicker of defiance. She was moving money around. Through shell companies. Nathan leaned forward. Sophia, this is important. Did you find anything about ownership certificates? Final paperwork for the resort. She hesitated. Maybe. There was a file about deed transfers. And something about final inspection scheduled for next month. The information thrummed with potential significance. If Sophia had found what Danner was looking for. Did you show these documents to anyone? I asked urgently. Or mention them? Just Emma, my best friend. She frowned. What? What's going on? Nathan and I exchanged glances. We think your mother may have been, I began. Involved with dangerous people, Nathan interrupted, shooting me a warning look. People who might still be looking for those documents. Understanding dawned in Sophia's eyes. That's why someone broke into our house. They weren't looking for valuables. They were looking for Mom's papers. Someone broke in? I echoed. 3 days ago. Dad thought it was random. Nothing seemed taken. Her gaze sharpened. But it wasn't random, was it? Before either of us could respond, my phone vibrated with a text from Vance. Danner just entered the store. North entrance. Get out now. We need to go, I said, standing abruptly. Now. Nathan grasped Sophia's arm. Leave everything. Use the west exit. As we hurried toward the stairs, Sophia clutched my sleeve. The documents you're looking for, I scanned everything I found. It's all on a flash drive. Where? Nathan asked. In my locker at school, she replied. Hidden inside my calculus textbook. We descended the stairs quickly, threading through browsing customers toward the west exit. Through gaps in the bookshelves, I glimpsed a tall figure in a charcoal suit, Lawrence Danner, moving purposefully through the main floor, flanked by a younger man with the unmistakable bearing of security personnel. Outside, Vance waited in an unmarked sedan, engine running. In, she ordered, throwing open the rear doors. All of you. As we pulled away from the curb, I looked back to see Danner emerging onto the sidewalk, scanning the street with cold calculation. His eyes met mine through the rear window, recognition flashing across his features. He'd seen us. And worse, he'd seen Sophia. He knows, I said as Vance accelerated through a yellow light. He knows we're working together. And he knows about Sophia, Nathan added, his arm protectively around his daughter's shoulders. The pieces of Evelyn's twisted game were converging. And now her daughter, perhaps the only person she genuinely loved, was caught in the crossfire. We need that flash drive, Vance said, weaving through downtown traffic with practiced precision. Now. Westlake Academy, Sophia directed from the back seat. But they'll never let you in without proper authorization. They will for me, Nathan said. I'll get it. Vance shook her head. Too risky. Danner saw you together. He could have people watching the school already. I can create a diversion at the main entrance, I suggested. Give Nathan cover to slip in through the athletic fields. No. Vance's voice was firm. I'll go. I'm the only one Danner doesn't know. 20 minutes later, we waited in the sedan 2 blocks from Westlake Academy. Vance had gone in posing as Sophia's aunt, armed with the locker number and combination. The silence in the car was heavy with unspoken questions. Why? Sophia finally asked, her voice small in the confined space. Why would she do this? Live this double life. I glanced at Nathan, but his gaze was fixed on the school entrance, jaw tight with worry. People are complicated, I said carefully. Sometimes they compartmentalize. Create separate versions of themselves. That's psychology textbook garbage, she replied, a flash of her mother's steel in her voice. Normal people don't maintain 2 marriages. 2 families. No, I agreed. They don't. Was she, I don't know, mentally ill? A sociopath? Nathan finally turned from the window. Your mother was brilliant, calculated, and utterly self-serving. Whether that qualifies as mental illness is for psychiatrists to debate. The harsh assessment hung in the air. I watched Sophia absorb it, her face a study in conflicting emotions. Anger, grief, confusion. The Costa Rica development, I said, changing direction. Did the documents mention who her partners were? Danner was the main investor, Sophia replied. But there were others. A company called Meridian Holdings. Some Russian-sounding names I couldn't pronounce. Nathan's phone buzzed with a text. Vance has the drive. Meeting us at the safe house. The safe house turned out to be a modest bungalow in a quiet southeast Portland neighborhood, owned by Vance's former partner on the force. Inside, Vance already had a laptop set up on the dining table, the flash drive inserted. It's encrypted, she said as we gathered around. Password protected. Sophia leaned forward. Try Neptune 7693. Mom used that for important accounts. Vance typed it in. Access denied. Her birthday. I suggested. March 16, 1989. Access denied. What about? Nathan hesitated. Try Sophie Ben-Emma. The kids' names. Vance entered it. Nothing. After several more failed attempts, Sophia suddenly straightened. The locket. Try Silver Locket 2017. The screen flickered, then opened to reveal dozens of meticulously organized folders. How did you know? I asked. It was inscribed inside the locket. Not initials like you thought. A password hint. SL.2017. She looked away. I found it years ago when I borrowed it for a school dance. Vance clicked through the folders. Financial, properties, identities, insurance, personal. Each contained subfolders with detailed documentation of Evelyn's elaborate schemes. The properties folder opened to reveal comprehensive files on the Costa Rica development, architectural plans, permit approvals, banking arrangements, and most critically the final ownership documents naming Evelyn Hart as the majority stakeholder through a complex network of shell companies. This is what Danner wants, Vance said, scrolling through the legal paperwork. With these documents, whoever controls them effectively owns a $40 million resort ready for sale. And since Evelyn is dead, Nathan began. Ownership transfers according to her will, I finished. Did she have one? For either identity? Both, Sophia said unexpectedly. I found them in the same hidden compartment. Mom left everything to us, me, Ben, and Emma. With Dad as trustee. Nathan looked stunned. I never saw this will. It was dated 3 weeks before she died, Sophia continued. Along with transfer paperwork for the Costa Rica property. Moving ownership fully to a trust in our names. Vance whistled softly. So Danner thought he was partnering with Evelyn, but she was positioning to cut him out completely. And if that's what got her killed? I let the implication hang in the air. A click from the personal folder opened a subfolder labeled Contingencies. Inside was a single video file dated 2 days before Evelyn's death. Vance double-clicked it. Evelyn's face filled the screen. Alive, vibrant, those familiar blue eyes staring directly into the camera. My heart clenched despite everything I now knew. If you're watching this, her recorded voice began, I'm either dead or disappeared. Neither was part of my plan, which means something has gone wrong. She paused, brushing a strand of hair from her face, a gesture so achingly familiar I had to look away. Lawrence suspects I'm planning to transfer ownership. He's threatened me. Doubled security on the development. If anything happens to me, he's behind it. Her expression hardened. The evidence is in the financial transfers. $3 million to Victor Mercer, former SEC, now Danner's private security. Specialized in untraceable eliminations. Nathan made a choked sound beside me. Nathan, if you're watching this, protect the children. Use the documents to secure their future. She hesitated. And Lucas, I'm sorry. You deserved better. The video ended, leaving a hollow silence in its wake. We have him, Vance said. This is enough to launch an investigation into Evelyn's death. The financial records alone. A sharp crack interrupted her, glass breaking at the rear of the house. Then another from the front door. Down? Vance shouted, drawing her weapon as the front door splintered open. Back room? Vance commanded, grabbing the laptop. Now. Nathan pulled Sophia to the floor as gunfire erupted, bullets splintering the dining table where we'd been sitting seconds before. I crawled toward them, heart hammering against my ribs. "The bathroom," Vance directed, covering our retreat as shadow figures moved through the front of the house. "Window to the backyard." We scrambled down the hallway as more shots rang out. Inside the small bathroom, Nathan frantically worked the window latch while Vance positioned herself at the door, weapon drawn. "It stuck," Nathan hissed, struggling with the old wooden frame. I grabbed a towel rack, tore it from the wall, and smashed it against the window. Glass shattered outward. "Go." Nathan helped Sophia through first, then followed. As I prepared to climb out, Vance pressed the laptop into my hands. "Take this. Get to the Marina office on Hayden Island. My partner Davies will meet you." Her eyes locked with mine. "I'll hold them off." "Vance." "Go," she insisted, already turning back toward the approaching footsteps. I hesitated, then squeezed through the broken window. The backyard opened onto an alley where Nathan and Sophia were already running toward a chain-link fence. Behind me, gunshots echoed inside the house, Vance engaging the intruders. We scaled the fence, dropping into another yard, then another, putting distance between ourselves and the safe house. Finally reaching a residential street, Nathan flagged down a passing taxi. "Hayden Island Marina," he directed, voice remarkably steady despite the circumstances. "And hurry." In the relative safety of the moving vehicle, I checked my pockets. The flash drive was secure, transferred from the laptop before we fled. Sophia sat between us, trembling but silent, eyes wide with shock. "Vance?" Nathan asked quietly. I shook my head slightly. "She stayed behind." His jaw tightened, but he said nothing more, pulling Sophia closer as she began to cry silently against his shoulder. The taxi delivered us to the Marina office as dusk settled over the Columbia River. A gruff man in his 50s waited nearby, recognizable by the description Vance had given us. Davies, her former partner. "Inside," he said curtly, leading us to a small houseboat moored at the end of the dock. Vance called. "She's alive, wounded but stable. Police have the safe house. 2 suspects in custody, 1 dead." Relief washed over me. "Danner?" "Not among them. Hired muscle." Davies secured the door behind us. "But they've connected the shooter to Mercer, which connects to Danner. Portland PD has issued warrants." The houseboat's interior was sparse but functional. 2 small bedrooms, a kitchenette, and a sitting area where Davies had set up communications equipment. "What now?" Nathan asked, settling Sophia on the small sofa. "We wait," Davies replied. "FBI is taking over the investigation based on the interstate nature of the financial crimes. They'll want statements." Hours passed in tense silence. Sophia eventually fell asleep, emotional exhaustion claiming her. Nathan and I took turns keeping watch while Davies coordinated with authorities from the deck outside. Near midnight, my phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. "It's over. Danner in custody at airport attempting to flee. Mercer dead in shootout with FBI. Vance stable in surgery. You're cleared to go home. Protective detail assigned to Hart children." I showed the message to Nathan, who closed his eyes briefly in relief. "Not quite the ending Evelyn planned," he said quietly, glancing at his sleeping daughter. "No," I agreed. "But maybe a better one for them." Morning brought FBI agents to the houseboat, professional, efficient, collecting our statements and the flash drive with its damning evidence. By noon, we were cleared to leave, the immediate danger neutralized with Danner's arrest and Mercer's death. Outside the Marina office, Nathan and I faced each other awkwardly, united by circumstances but still fundamentally strangers linked by a dead woman's betrayal. "What will you do now?" he asked. I considered the question. My life, my career, my home, all tainted by Evelyn's deceptions. "Leave Portland, I think. Start over somewhere." He nodded, understanding. "And the life insurance money?" I already called the companies. Told them to redirect my portions to a trust for the children. The decision had come easily, sometime during the long night. "It seems right." Surprise flickered across his face. Thank you." Sophia approached, looking younger in the daylight, exhaustion etched in the shadows beneath her eyes. I reached into my pocket and withdrew Evelyn's silver locket. "This belongs with you," I said, placing it in her palm. "Whatever else she was, whatever she did. I think she truly loved you." Sophia studied the locket, fingers tracing its familiar contours. "She was a liar. A con artist. Maybe worse." "Yes," I acknowledged. "But also your mother. Human. Complicated." "How do you forgive something like this?" she asked, looking up at me with Evelyn's eyes. "I don't know if forgiveness is possible," I admitted. or even necessary. But understanding might be. Someday. She slipped the locket into her pocket. Will I see you again? The question caught me off guard. This child who wasn't mine, yet connected to me through the strangest of circumstances. If you want, I replied. I'd like that. Nathan extended his hand. Thank you. For everything. I shook it, finding a strange sense of closure in the gesture. Take care of them. As I walked away toward the taxi stand, my phone buzzed with a news alert. Financial mogul Lawrence Danner arrested for murder, fraud. Justice, or something approximating it, had been served. Yet as Portland's skyline receded behind me, what I felt wasn't triumph or even relief, just a hollow certainty that the woman I'd loved had never truly existed at all. 6 months later, I stood at the edge of Cannon Beach, watching waves crash against the iconic Haystack Rock. The Oregon coast in September offered a different kind of beauty than Portland's urban landscapes. Wilder, more honest. Like me, perhaps, in my new life. I'd relocated to Seattle, accepted a position with a smaller accounting firm, and begun the slow process of rebuilding. My apartment there held no ghosts, no hidden cameras, no memories of Evelyn. Just clean lines, empty spaces, and the possibility of something genuine. The manila envelope in my hand contained the last of her ashes. I hadn't been able to scatter them after the funeral, not when her body had still been a mystery to me. Now, with the truth laid bare, it seemed right to complete this final ritual. Letting go. I turned to find Detective Vance approaching along the beach, her gait slightly uneven from the injury sustained during the safe house shootout. She kept in touch sporadically, updating me on the case's legal proceedings. Trying to, I replied, gesturing to the envelope. Seemed appropriate. She nodded, understanding without need for elaboration. Danner's trial starts next month. Prosecutor says it's solid. Between the financial evidence and Evelyn's video testimony, he's looking at 20 years minimum. Good. We stood in companionable silence, watching the waves. Have you heard from them? The Harts. Vance finally asked. Nathan emails occasionally. Updates on the kids. I smiled faintly. Sophia's applying to colleges. Pre-law. Like mother, like daughter. In the better ways, hopefully. The comment held no malice, just acknowledgement of Evelyn's undeniable intelligence, now channeled more constructively in her daughter. I got this yesterday, I said, pulling a letter from my jacket pocket. From Sophia. Vance raised an eyebrow but didn't pry. The letter had arrived unexpectedly at my Seattle address. 3 pages of thoughtful reflection from a young woman grappling with her mother's legacy and her own identity in its shadow. I've been wearing the locket, she'd written. Not because I've forgiven her, but because I'm trying to understand. The woman who tucked me in at night and the woman who built elaborate financial schemes, they were both real. Both her. I'm learning that people contain multitudes, even when those multitudes include terrible choices. Her insight, so mature for 16, had touched something in me. The possibility that understanding could exist without excusing. That complexity didn't negate authenticity. She's going to be okay, I told Vance. Better than okay. And you? I considered the question. Getting there. We walked toward Haystack Rock, the envelope still in my hand. The September sun broke through clouds that had threatened rain all morning, casting golden light across the water. Did you love her? Vance asked suddenly. The real her, underneath it all? I loved who I thought she was, I replied after a moment. Whether that person existed in any form, I may never know. We reached a rocky outcropping that extended into the surf. Perfect for what I needed to do. Want privacy? Vance offered. I shook my head. No. I've had enough of that. I opened the envelope, the gray ashes catching sunlight as they spilled into my palm. Who had Evelyn Hart Shaw really been? Con artist, loving mother, unfaithful wife, brilliant schemer? All of these, perhaps. A kaleidoscope of identities that had fractured and reformed depending on who was watching. Goodbye, Evelyn, I said simply, releasing the ashes to the wind and waves. Whoever you were. They scattered across the water, disappearing into the vastness of the Pacific. With them went the last physical remnant of the woman who had shared my bed, my name, my life, yet remained a stranger. As we turned back toward shore, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unfamiliar number. I opened it to find a photo of Sophie, Benjamin, and Emma standing before a college campus, smiling cautiously into the camera. Beneath it, a simple message, visiting Stanford today. Thought you might like to know. Something warm unfurled in my chest, not quite healing but its precursor. The possibility that from Evelyn's elaborate deceptions, something genuine might yet emerge. Not family exactly, but connection. Truth freely given rather than lies carefully crafted. Good news? Vance asked, noting my expression. Just life, I replied, pocketing the phone. Continuing. We walked back along the beach as the clouds parted fully, revealing a clear blue sky that mirrored the ocean below. For the first time in months, I felt the weight of betrayal lifting, replaced by something lighter, less defined but infinitely more hopeful. Portland had been Evelyn's city, a place of dual lives and shadowed truths. But this coastline, with its raw beauty and relentless clarity, felt like somewhere I might eventually belong. Somewhere authentic. I glanced back once at the diminishing waves that had carried Evelyn's ashes out to sea. Not in longing but in acknowledgement. Then I turned toward the future, walking beside Vance as the rain clouds cleared completely, allowing sunlight to illuminate the path forward.